The moment I saw my husband's face, I knew something was wrong. He stood in the living room, his phone in his hand, his fingers gripping it so tightly his knuckles had turned white. His eyes weren't just angry, they were something worse, shattered. He turned the phone toward me and my stomach dropped. It was a picture of me and my trainer, too close, too intimate. My laughter frozen in time, his hand resting on my waist like it belonged there. The room spun, my chest tightened. I opened my mouth, but no words came out, because in that moment I realized there was nothing I could say that would make this go away. I used to believe that love was supposed to feel effortless, that once you found the right person, the kind of love that made you feel whole, it would last forever, without struggle, without distance. But love isn't like that. Marriage isn't like that. It starts with passion, with fire, with hands that can't stay away from each other. But over time, it turns into something else, something softer, quieter, and sometimes emptier. My husband and I were never unhappy. We were just comfortable, too comfortable. The kind of comfort that makes silence stretch longer than it should, that turns quick kisses into routine pecks on the cheek. The kind of comfort where days blur together, where passion is replaced with schedules, work stress and conversations that only revolve around responsibilities. He was a good man, he still is. But somewhere along the way, I started feeling invisible. I don't know when it started exactly. Maybe it was the nights he came home too tired to talk, or the weekends spent sitting on opposite ends of the couch, scrolling through our phones instead of looking at each other. Maybe it was the fact that I couldn't even remember the last time he had looked at me the way he used to, as if I was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. I tried to ignore the feeling, to shake it off as something normal. This happens in every marriage, right? The excitement fades, the fire burns out a little, but it doesn't mean anything is wrong. It just means we've settled into something safe. And wasn't that what I wanted? But then I looked in the mirror one day and didn't recognize myself. The reflection staring back at me looked dull. Not just physically, though the tiredness in my eyes was impossible to ignore, but emotionally too. I felt like I was disappearing, like I had become just a wife, just a routine, just a shadow of the woman I used to be. That's when I decided to join the gym. At first, it wasn't about anything more than wanting to feel better about myself. I wanted to wake up feeling strong, to see a version of myself in the mirror that I actually liked. And that's what it was in the beginning. Early morning workouts, sore muscles, a sense of accomplishment. And then I met him. He was different. From the moment he introduced himself, there was something about him that I couldn't ignore. Maybe it was the way he carried himself, confident but not arrogant, strong but not overbearing. Or maybe it was his eyes, the way they really looked at me when I spoke. Like I mattered, like I was still someone worth noticing. The first time he corrected my form, his hands on my waist, it was innocent, professional, but I still felt it. A tingle in my skin that had nothing to do with the workout. I told myself I was imagining it, that I was just reading into something that wasn't there. But then it happened again and again. The casual touches, the inside jokes, the way he would stand just a little too close, his presence enough to make my breath hitch. It was harmless. That's what I told myself. It's just a trainer being friendly. It's just a little bit of fun. It's just a reminder that I'm still desirable, that someone still sees me. Because my husband hadn't looked at me like that in years. It wasn't about falling in love. It wasn't about wanting to leave my marriage. It was about something simpler, something more dangerous. It felt good to be noticed, to be wanted. And once I let myself enjoy that feeling, even just a little, there was no turning back. I told myself it was nothing. a harmless exchange of words, a friendly conversation that meant nothing more than a passing moment in time. But the truth was, the first time I responded to his late-night text, something inside me shifted. It wasn't about what he said, it was the way I waited for his reply. The way my heart raced when my phone vibrated. The way I smiled at the screen, biting my lip, feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Anticipation. I should have stopped it then. I should have ignored the message, let it fade into the background of my life like so many other things. But I didn't. Instead, I answered. And that was the beginning of everything. The texts turned into daily conversations, little check-ins that made me feel seen in a way I hadn't in a long time. How was your day? Did you sleep well? You looked strong in the gym today. They were just words, simple and easy, but they meant something. They meant he was thinking about me. And I liked it. I liked the way he paid attention to the smallest details, the way I tied my hair, the way I pushed myself harder on the treadmill when I was frustrated, the way my mood changed depending on the kind of music playing. My husband never noticed things like that anymore. Maybe that's why I let the touches linger. The first time his hand stayed on my back longer than necessary, I felt it. The warmth, the quiet confidence, the way it sent a slow, unwelcome thrill through me. He didn't rush, didn't push. He just let the moment stretch, just enough for me to notice. And I did. The next time it was my hand grazing his arm as we laughed at something ridiculous. A tiny, meaningless gesture, except it wasn't meaningless, because I felt it again, the rush, the electric undercurrent, and I knew I was standing at the edge of something dangerous, something I couldn't undo once I stepped forward. But I didn't stop. The first real mistake wasn't the messages or the touches. It was the night I stayed behind after my workout, when I could have left but didn't. He leaned against the wall, arms crossed, watching me. "You're different lately," he said, and there was something in his voice, something knowing. I swallowed, my fingers tightening around my water bottle. "Different how?" he smirked. "You already know. I could have laughed it off, could have walked away, but instead I held his gaze. And that was it, the first real moment, the point of no return. Because once you acknowledge something out loud, once you stop pretending it's not there, it becomes real. It became real that night when he took a step closer, when I didn't move away, when his fingers traced the inside of my wrist, slow, deliberate, waiting, and when I let him. I told myself it was just one kiss, one moment of weakness, but deep down I already knew one would never be enough. I started coming home later than usual. At first I had good excuses, traffic, errands, and extra set at the gym. My husband never questioned me, at least not in the beginning. He was used to my routine, the way I balanced everything between work and home, never making a fuss, never giving him a reason to suspect. But then things changed. I would step into the house, my body still warm from the workout, my heart still racing, not from exercise but from something else, something I wasn't ready to admit. He would look up from his laptop, his eyes flickering over me for only a second before returning to his screen. "Good workout," he'd ask, and I would nod, forcing a smile, walking past him to the bathroom so he wouldn't see the guilt sitting in my eyes. I told myself it was fine, that it didn't mean anything, that I was still in control. But deep down, I knew better. The messages on my phone became more frequent. I had always been someone who left my phone face up on the kitchen counter, never thinking twice about it. But suddenly I found myself keeping it close, turning it face down, silencing the notifications. One night, as I was brushing my teeth, my phone buzzed on the sink. My husband was lying in bed, scrolling through his own phone, seemingly lost in his own world. I wiped my mouth quickly, heart hammering, grabbing the phone before he could look over. He glanced up, just for a second. I forced myself to act natural, typing a quick response and setting it back down, my fingers tightening around the edge of the sink. But I could feel it. The shift, the way he watched me a little longer than usual, the way his questions started to sound different, not accusing, not yet, just searching. "Who was that?" he asked casually. I laughed, shaking my head. "Just a friend." The words tasted bitter in my mouth. He nodded, not pushing, but I knew. He knew. Maybe not the whole truth, but enough to feel the weight of it. The first time I lied, it was easy. The second time I convinced myself it was necessary. But the third time I realized that I had built something that I could no longer control. One evening he asked if I wanted to go out for dinner. It was a simple request, something we hadn't done in a while, and yet my stomach twisted. "I have a late session at the gym," I told him, avoiding his eyes. "Maybe another night." He stared at me for a long time, as if weighing his next words carefully. "You've been spending a lot of time there," I shrugged, forcing a casual tone. "It helps me clear my mind." Silence stretched between us. He didn't say anything, but I felt the weight of his unspoken thoughts. That night, as I laid in bed beside him, my phone hidden under the pillow, a message flashed across the screen. "I can't stop thinking about you." I turned on to my side, away from my husband, my heart pounding so loud it drowned out everything else. The living room felt different that evening. The air was thick, charged like the quiet before a pop storm. He was sitting on the couch, one leg crossed over the other, phone in his hand, staring at the screen. He hadn't looked up since I walked in. No greeting, no usual glance in my direction. Something felt off, something in the way his fingers tightened around the phone like it was holding something too heavy to carry alone. I set my bag down slowly, waiting for him to speak. He didn't. A slow, sinking feeling settled into my chest. His knuckles were white now. The silence stretched longer, pressing against my ribs, making it hard to breathe. Then he finally moved. His hand lifted, turning the phone toward me, the screen bright, a picture frozen in time. The air left my lungs. My mind screamed at me to stay calm, to act normal, but my body betrayed me. My stomach twisted, my throat closed, and a cold sweat prickled at my skin. It was a picture of us, me and him, too close. The angle was slightly blurred, but the meaning was clear. His arm was around my waist, my body leaned into him, my laughter caught in the frame like something innocent. But it wasn't innocent. It wasn't harmless. It was proof of something I could never take back. My husband's voice was quiet when he finally spoke, too quiet. "Explain this." A demand, not a question. My mouth opened, but no words came out. What was there to say? That it wasn't what it looked like? That it was just a coincidence? A misunderstanding? But it was what it looked like. It was exactly that. His eyes burned into me, waiting. "Where did you get that?" My voice came out weaker than I wanted. He let out a sharp, bitter laugh, shaking his head. "That's what you want to ask me?" My hands clenched at my sides. "Your friend sent it to me." He cut me off, his voice shaking now. "Said she thought I should see it before I looked like an idiot any longer." My stomach twisted. The realization hit hard. Someone had seen me. Someone had known. I swallowed, tried to find something, anything to say that could make this hurt less. "It's not—" "Don't," he snapped, standing up so suddenly that the movement made me flinch. "Don't you dare stand there and lie to me." Anger, betrayal, hurt, all of it burned in his eyes, and I realized in that moment there was no coming back from this. My hands trembled. My entire body felt like it wasn't mine anymore, like I was floating somewhere outside of it, watching everything fall apart. "I was going to tell you," I whispered. It was pathetic, but it was the truth. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but some part of me knew this wouldn't have stayed hidden forever. His laughter was hollow. "Oh, were you? Before or after you got caught?" The weight of it crushed me. I wanted to say more, to make him understand, but how do you explain a betrayal like this? How do you ask for forgiveness when you don't even know if you deserve it? His voice was quieter when he spoke again, but somehow it was worse than his shouting. "How long?" Tears burned at the back of my throat. "It wasn't... How? Long." I felt my resolve crack. "A few months." He inhaled sharply like I had just punched him in the chest. His hands went to his head, fingers threading through his hair as he turned away, as if looking at me another second would make him sick. A thick silence filled the space between us, heavier than anything I had ever felt before. Then finally he spoke, voice hollow. "I want you to leave." The words knocked the breath out of me. I knew this was coming, but hearing them still shattered something inside me. I took a step toward him, but he stepped back, shaking his head. "Don't." A single word, sharp and final. My heart cracked open. I had ruined everything, and for the first time since it all began, I felt the full weight of what I had done. The apartment felt hollow, stripped of warmth, of familiarity. His absence was everywhere, in the silence that replaced the sound of his voice, in the untouched side of the bed, in the way my fingers hovered over my phone, before realizing there was no message to wait for, no call to expect. I had destroyed everything. I sat in the dimly lit living room, my body numb, replaying the moment he told me to leave, the way his voice cracked, the way his hands trembled, the way his eyes, once filled with love, held nothing but betrayal. I should have begged him to stay. I should have fallen to my knees, told him I'd do anything, be anything, to fix what I broke. But I didn't. Because deep down, I didn't know if I wanted to fix it. I reached for my phone, my fingers hesitating before opening my messages. His name was still there, the trainer, the man I had risked everything for, the man who had made me feel seen, wanted, alive. I typed a message. "I need to see you." A pause. 3 dots appeared on the screen, then his response. "Now? Now." The drive to his place felt surreal, like I was watching someone else make this choice. Someone reckless, someone desperate. My heart pounded, my mind raced, but I couldn't stop. Myself. When I arrived, he was waiting at the door, arms crossed, a small smirk tugging at his lips, like this was just another night, like nothing had changed. "You okay?" he asked, stepping aside to let me in. I walked past him, the air thick with something unspoken. "He knows," I said, my voice hollow. "He saw the pictures." A slow exhale, a flicker of something in his eyes. "And," I swallowed the lump in my throat, "he told me to leave." Silence. Then he nodded, like this was the outcome he expected, like this was inevitable. "So, what now?" The question hung between us, heavy, unanswered. I searched his face, looking for something, regret, reassurance, love. But all I saw was acceptance, not of me, not of us, just of the fact that this was never meant to last. "You don't have to stay," he said, voice careful, detached. "You don't owe me anything." A bitter laugh escaped my lips. "And what if I want to?" His eyes met mine, steady, unreadable. "Do you?" I opened my mouth, ready to say yes, to convince myself that this was worth it, that I had made the right choice, but the words never came. Because in that moment, standing in front of him, I realized the truth. He had never been my future. He was an escape, a beautiful, dangerous, intoxicating escape, and now that my world had crumbled, I had nowhere left to run. Tears stung my eyes as I stepped back. I should go. He didn't stop me. He just nodded like he had always known this moment would come. I walked out the door, out into the cold night, alone. For the first time, I wasn't someone's wife. I wasn't someone's affair. I was just me, and I had no idea who that was anymore.